Good morning, Imagine Church, and happy Sunday. And a big congratulations to all of you 2020 graduates. You did it. You finished during a global pandemic in this unprecedented time and all. And we are so proud of you. And we are so excited to see what you continue to do in this world as you move forward, pursuing all of your dreams and your passions and your curiosities from within. And so would you know that the best is ahead, and would you know that we are incredibly proud of you. And congratulations to everyone else who survived another week of being shelter in place during this time as the world begins to slowly reopen itself up. Our biggest prayer and hope is that you yourself would also courageously continue to open yourself up to a life of freedom, to a life of joy, and to a life of grace. Thank you, Cam and Wes, for making these moments on Sunday possible with your beautiful gift of storytelling and capturing the moments and being able to weave all the different pieces you folks beautifully do for us to engage and to be a part of. We are so blessed by your sacrifice and everything that goes into these Sunday moments together. And it has been incredible to hear new voices and to see new faces on worship. That has been such a joy to experience. So thank you for those who are part of our worship crew. Thank you for your courage, and thank you for everything that you're doing in allowing us to experience a depth of God's presence through our worship time together. We are excited to continue to move forward in this series, in what Kevin is preaching about, the wilderness, the time of being in the wilderness. And as we continue to move forward, we have some exciting things to share in our next coming weeks as far as what it looks like to be part of this community besides our time together on Sunday. And one of those things is living rooms, which we've talked about before, and we'll talk more about that next week. Living rooms is a time where we connect in the middle of the week, virtually, social distancing, but where we're able to connect with other people. And so if you have been thinking about this or are interested in this, hold on, and we'll be able to share a little bit more next week. It's a great time, again, to connect with each other, to connect to the Word, and to connect with what God is doing in our community and in our neighborhood and in ourselves. Another way of connecting is also on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. when the kids go down. That's what we call it. When the kids go down at 8 p.m., Kevin and I log on to Instagram Live. Our Instagram is ImagineHI. So we log on at 8 p.m. and it's a time where we integrate topics dealing with mental health and spirituality, especially during a time like this. And we host a conversation. We present things, and we also engage in conversations with you. And so we would love to be able to connect with you there also on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. And so we have a couple more things that we will be sharing more in the next weeks to come. But until then, it is great to always be able to log on with you, to be able to chat with you on Sunday mornings. And we look forward in connecting some more.
There's nothing worth more could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. And I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. presence, Lord.
There's nothing worth more that would ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen all the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord.
Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. By your presence, Lord. By your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. By your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord.
What have you learned or seen with more clarity about life and God during this time of coronavirus? For me, I'll be honest, I used to be a highly anxious person, and it's something that I've worked on for years. And usually anxiety has an association with control. And what do you do when there's a process of pandemic going on and you have no control over this? And I think in regards to life, it's taught me that you have to let go, and you have to just, you can't control this process that we're going through. And that's tough for me. And I think in regards to God, it's, I've learned that I just have to have faith in the process, and it's tough. I don't like it sometimes. There's a lot of uncertainties, a lot of unknowns, but it's got me to put a lot more faith in Him and to just fear not. And it's been an important part of my spirituality and my connectivity every day, and I'm grateful for it. Sometimes you're on autopilot, and I think it's just gotten me to focus more on my connectivity with Him and just putting more faith in Him and just letting go.
During this time, I've been able to truly see again how powerful love can really be, and how love can be expressed in so many different ways. For me, I had my birthday in April, and while it wasn't a big deal, honestly, at the time, I thought, wow, this sucks, especially since I was turning 25. But then My friends all wished me happy birthday that day, and some of them I didn't even expect would remember, and I didn't expect all of them to take that time out of their day to wish me happy birthday, because I know some of them are really struggling during this time. And one of my friends even baked a birthday cake for me, and we ended up having an impromptu Zoom party, and they all sung happy birthday to me, and they went around and shared their favorite memories with me and just truly showed how they cherished me as a friend. And yeah, just during that time, I really felt so much love, and I felt seen. And it was just very special and really made me believe in the power of love again.
the way that I've been challenged to grow is how to be patient. A quick example, last month when I started dealing with an employment application, I know a lot of people felt the same way, so frustrated and so irritated and mad. Just the fact that you couldn't get into the system and do what you need to do. So that required a lot of patience, and now that things are flowing, I see God saying, see, you didn't need to spend much your time or wasting your time or focus on that yucky energy. And also to be patient to wait for all this pandemic and this lockdown to finish. And we know that things is not gonna happen like that, and we are all going through this very slow healing process, but for sure it requires a lot of patience, trusting God and believing that He has a better future for us. And I want to enjoy this opportunity to say a big mahalo for Kevin and Christine for keeping Imagine alive, and thank also everyone who's working behind the scene, everybody who's been watching and keeping connected at some point. I miss you, church. Thank you. Obrigada.
So I've been challenged to grow in several different ways during this pandemic. And I think the first started with changing my mindset. This pandemic really did show me that, you can make all these plans for your life and think that certain things are gonna happen. This year I had plans to travel, but life just kind of happens sometimes, and things don't always go according to plan, and you can change how you react to that. So I think you can either resist it or embrace it, and I've really been trying to embrace the change and kind of go with the flow, which can be hard, but I think it's harder if you are resisting that. It also taught me that things like my job aren't as secure as I thought it was when I got furloughed and laid off, but it also did really allow me a time to pause and take some time for myself and to work on personal development, which has been really, really important and really nice. So I've been trying to be more grateful for the things that I do have.
For me, this time has been really challenging in a lot of ways, but also really beautiful at the same time. All this extra time has really brought up everything that I have struggled with and continue to struggle with that I didn't really realize was still affecting me so much. I've felt triggered by almost everything, such as anxiety, comparison, jealousy, food, body image, all of that. That's just always kind of ruled my life, and I haven't really dealt with it until now that I have all this time, and it's really forced me to be with myself and reflect and think about why these things are still affecting me. It's given me time to realize what I value and what's most important to me and what's not, and what I want and what I don't want. The relationships in my life, how am I contributing to them? How am I treating the people that I love the most in my life? This time is actually such a gift. I would have never had it before, and I really would regret not using it to try to grow, as much as I can or as little as I can, I just hope that I can come out of this a little bit stronger, a little bit softer on myself, and give myself more grace moving forward, and really try to overcome some of these shadowy things that I've been so afraid of for so long.
I'll praise before my breakthrough, until my song becomes my triumph. I'll sing because I trust you. I will bring my heart and I will lift my song. I'll praise before my breakthrough. I'll praise before my breakthrough. Till my song becomes my triumph. Till my song becomes my triumph. I'll sing because I trust you. I trust you. I will bring my heart. I will lift my song. I'll sing because I trust you. I trust you. I will bring my heart. I will lift my song. I will sing unto you. I'll sing because I trust you. I'll sing because I trust you. I'll sing because I love you. I'll sing because I love you. I'll sing because I trust you. Oh, we sing because we trust you. How we love you. How we love
Yeah, I was told to answer the question of what gives me hope during this time of coronavirus. And I think for a while it was kind of hard to find hope in places. I mean, you can find a little bit here and there, but overall it was just feeling like every day was blurring together and that time wasn't really moving. But last week my old assistant coach, he just had a baby boy. And I think that just brought a lot of perspective for me. You know, like babies, they grow up so quick, and you can see that throughout the week progressively. And I think it just made me reflect and realize that we're still growing as people too, and every day isn't the same. Like time's still moving, and you know, we're still growing as people, and we're getting smarter and learning new things about each other. And as a community, I think we're improving, and just knowing that every day is not the same, and you know, time's still moving forward.
I would say my family has given me the most hope during these coronavirus times. At one point, all my siblings were unfortunately out of a job, and they all remained so hopeful and so kind, and just knowing that no matter what we lose through all this, that my family will always be there, and we'll always be there for each other. And those are things that won't change, or you can't take away. Yeah.
All right. It's so good to be back together again. It's just so interesting and so special to think about how everybody's in their own space right now, and yet still miraculously the Spirit can create this shared space amongst us, this experience we enter into together to not only open ourselves up to the Spirit, but actually to strangely and beautifully open ourselves up to each other, even as we're connecting like this. So I love all of you. We miss you guys. We are, actually, I'll just wait to get into the teaching to get into that. But first, to not disappoint my people, let's start off with a couple, it's a little light work today. Not 5, maybe 4 memes. 4 coronavirus memes to start off with, just because we always got to keep up to date on, where we're at as a culture in the meme life. So here's the first one. I like this one right here. I thought he was wearing a mask. Do you see it? Oh, when I first saw this, it like borderline freaked me out for like 1 second before I actually saw it. Because the masks are normal and they're throwing us off and it's messing with our eyes now. Like here's this next one. When all of your friends are talking about all the jobs they applied for online and you just finished a survey to find out what type of bread you are. Oh, how's the time management going for us right now? What stupid things are we getting caught up in? Oh, this is too good. This one right here. If one of your pillows looks like this, you can survive coronavirus. For some of you, and you know who you are, this is so true. If you could survive this, especially as a kid, but some of you even now, if you could survive this, then you can definitely survive the coronavirus. Hold on 1 second. I'll show you my current pillow that I'm using. Let me choose the side that doesn't have those marks. Is one of Michaela's old pillow covers. So you can't see what's inside, and I'm not gonna show you. So, but some of you know, if you survive that, you're gonna be okay. The last one right here, let's just embrace this together. It's quarantine time, baby. There are no rules. Cut your bangs, shave your head, get a mullet. It's now or never, folks. Like, this is the time to do the thing, because there's like no backlash. I had this thought, I wrote it on my Insta stories this week, but it was funny. I had this thought where I was like, I should buy some new clothes. I just know I'll probably need some. Then 10 seconds later, I had this thought, why? Like, I'm not going anywhere. So there's not as much consequences. Do the thing. And let's get back into the wilderness right now. Exodus 18, 1 through 7. A little context. The Israelites don't know it, but they are sort of moving through the wilderness and they're about to get to Mount Sinai. And Mount Sinai is where the 10 Commandments are given, where God sort of communes with Moses in this powerful way. And it's a defining moment for the Israelites forever, including up until this day today in 2020. So everything's about to change, but they don't know it yet. Verse 1. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, heard of everything God had done for Moses, for his people Israel, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. So this is Moses' father-in-law right here, who was a priest in a different culture, in a different environment. After Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her and her 2 sons. So earlier in their journey, Moses sent his family away, and now he's being reunited with the father-in-law. One son was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. The other was named Eliezer, for he said, my father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh, looking back to Egypt. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness where he was camped near the mountain of God. Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and your 2 sons. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. Very cultural thing. They greeted each other and then went into the tent. Context: they are on the edge of something new. They just can't yet fully see it. Mount Sinai, which they're about to get to, where the law is given, where they meet God, is about to change them and define them and mark them forever. See, they're entering into a new beginning. They just can't see it yet. That's why I like to say this is the moment before the moment. And I kind of feel like on one level, we're on the edge of something new right now. In our culture, for the church, as individuals, I feel like we're in the moment before the moment as well. Because things are reopening, our culture is changing, the economy is going to start to change a bit too with that, but we don't fully know how yet, do we? Things are starting to reopen, but we don't know exactly what that is going to mean for us. As individuals, as the church, for our families, for our jobs, like everything is going to change slowly and progressively, but we don't fully know what that's going to look like or what that's going to mean or how that's going to define us or who we're going to become and what we're going to do as we move in that. Here's my first thought as we just think about the moment before the moment. Right now, it's not about our minds predicting with certainty. It's about our hearts having a posture of possibility. Right? You cannot, nobody cannot predict with certainty how this is all going to go. That's not within our realm of control, is it? But this is about us in our heart embracing and living with a posture of possibility. So as we move into the constantly changing unknown, our hearts are positioned and prepared and postured and leaning towards hope and possibility. So when whatever comes, we are ready to step into this new world that God has for us, the new opportunities, relationships, all the newness. Are our hearts postured and prepared? That's what you have control over, the posture of your heart. Now, a quick story. I was talking with a friend of mine from the mainland this week. So there's a story about this guy, and he's an entrepreneur. He started something years ago, something successful, something wonderful. I'm keeping it vague in case, I don't want to put him on blast. And, however many years into it he is now, because of this pandemic, his whole situation has changed, right? Don't we all feel like that to some degree? And his business has changed, the future has changed, his staff has changed, the finances have changed. There's so much changing for him right now that when we talked, he was like, man, I kind of feel like I'm an entrepreneur. I feel like this is a startup again when I'm so far from that phase. It's like it's a startup where I'm having to adapt and I'm doing so many new things on my own and you're scrambling to put things together. And as he was sharing his frustration and how hard it was with the thing that he's a part of, he finally was like, man, this is not where I thought I would be at this age. And then he said, I just don't know if I have what it takes to begin again. I don't know if I can begin again. And while I feel for him, and I feel that too in some ways for myself, and I feel that for everybody who feels like that, when we say we're not sure if we can begin again, the thing is that's exactly what's needed from you right now. You need to have the courage, the tenacity, the faith, the trust, and the grit to begin again as our world starts to change another time. And here's the thing. You can do that. You can begin again. Maybe the defining marker for people of faith right now is we are the people who allow ourselves, who dare to begin again. See, if you've lost money and it's overwhelming to think about what's ahead, you can begin again. If you've lost your job and you don't know what's going to happen or how you're going to make it work, you can begin again. If you feel like you spent so much time building something only to see it seemingly be completely taken from you right now and you're overwhelmed thinking about trying to rebuild in the future, you can begin again. If you look forward to things and they've disappeared, you can begin again. And if you work so hard to put yourself in a certain position only to have that position completely stripped from you in this process, no matter how hard it is to imagine another future, you can begin again. See, you have to mysteriously trust that no time has been wasted because you can begin again. Oh, we could just stop right there, but let's move on a little bit. Verse 8, let's jump ahead. Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships they had met along the way and how the Lord had saved them. So he's telling the story of God's deliverance of him and his people. And Jethro, his father-in-law, who was a priest in a different culture, already a religious man, was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. He said, "Praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the other gods. For he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly." There's a shift in his father-in-law because of the stories that Moses tells him about God's deliverance. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. Moses bears witness to all the things that God has done. He tells the story of God delivering them from the hands of the Egyptians and how God had sustained them. It's like his basic confession of faith in that moment. His core belief is, I am connected with and cared for by the God who delivers. Who is this God? The one who delivers us. Who is this God? The one who hears the cries of the hurting and the oppressed. Who is this God? This is the God who is all about liberation. He's not arguing about dogma. He's not fighting over religious specificity. He is telling and announcing that we live in a world who is governed by a God who delivers and liberates and saves his people. And his father-in-law is moved and responds with a declaration of faith that this God is ahead of all the other gods of the culture at that time. See, that faith, that story is transmitted through generation and generation through the telling of the stories. See, that's why I would say this. Even in the wilderness, you can still tell stories of God's faithfulness. And I would say, especially in the wilderness, it's important and it's imperative to tell stories of God's faithfulness, the God who delivers. And what's interesting, yesterday I had this amazing moment where as I was walking around our neighborhood in Kaka'ako and I was sort of going over some of this teaching in my head and I got to this moment, I'm like, well, what are some stories of God's deliverance and faithfulness? And all of a sudden, I had this amazing moment where I was walking through the neighborhood of Kaka'ako, remembering all of the stories of God's faithfulness, deliverance, power to save, all through this community. And I just want to tell some of those stories to you right now in the same way Moses told his father-in-law. So some of these are like family stories in the history you may have heard. Some of them are brand new, but these stories, as we retell them, open up this door to have faith and trust to a different future. So, how many people here who are listening know, appreciate, and are grateful for the Dombros? Come on, Uncle Mark and Auntie Paula, one of the most classic couples of all time. You know, it's a funny story is, I think that we're not the first time I met her, but the first time Christine and I went out to dinner with Uncle Mark and Auntie Paula, we weren't even in the restaurant yet. We were going to Himalayan Kitchen in Kaimuki. We weren't even in the restaurant yet. As we're walking from our cars to the thing, Auntie Paula's like, look, Kev, I just want to let you know, I already told my daughter that if you guys aren't kind and accept gays, I'm out. I'm not coming. I was like, we didn't even get our appetizers yet. And when she said that, I just laughed. I was like, oh man, I just met one of my new best friends. It was so funny. But here's this couple who I think probably around 60 at the time comes to, here's a picture right here. 441, look at that. You see those reflexes? A tiny little bug somehow on the 37th floor in the studio. And I smashed it with that focus. Let's get back. I got distracted. At 60 years old, come to this old warehouse in Kaka'ako that was redone. They come to hear their daughters sing worship for some church called Imagine. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, are being baptized together at Waimea Bay, where Uncle Mark was a lifeguard for, let's just say, around 30-ish years. And now, after not being in church for 40 years, coming into the church, getting baptized, they're now one of the strongest parts of the foundation and some of the most important leaders and elders that we have in the church. When we think about, do I have it in me to begin again at 60? They begin again and start this whole new adventure that they're still on. Okay, let me see. All right, Sean Grotto. How many people here know and love Grotto? Another question would, at least how many people here know Grotto? We can even just keep it there. But yeah, when Christine and I first moved back early 2013, we meet Sean through other friends we had just met outside of Mai Tais, RIP obviously. And we just connect. We probably hang out a handful of times. And a funny story, the first time we ever gathered for Imagine for worship in our old home around Diamond Head, Grotto shows up with our other friend Matt. And when they are walking up to the door, they see a few people coming in with Bibles. And they're like in shock. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, fun. And they're like, oh, like, is that like the admission? Do we need these to get in? Do they check at the door like, King James, you can come in. NIV, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Like, it was so funny because he didn't know what was happening when he sees people walking in with these Bibles. And then a year and a half later, gets baptized in Kahala. Then is sort of one of the core parts of all of Imagine. Now on the core team, doing all of the media and Instagram stuff and just helping steer and lead our church to the future. These are the stories I remember. True just walked in right now. These are the stories I remember that we retell during these moments. I remember another story in Bevy. Do you guys remember Bevy? How long ago does that seem? I walk by it every day, but how long ago and how good was that? How good did we have it? And we didn't even realize it. Remember there was a story of the first ever whole sermon I did on like the church and the LGBTQ community. A girl from our church invites her roommate, this guy, a young gay man who was getting ready to graduate college, to church, sort of explaining to him what we're going to talk about. And he tells me that he came sort of with that spite of like, I already know what they're going to say, but I guess I'll just come and just kind of listen to this sort of magical, mythical, old nonsense. You know, he was a kid who had grown up in the church and had really made some decisions to move beyond it and maybe never go back. And he says from the moment he walked in as that gathering started, that he was absolutely floored by the presence of God. He said he just sat there with like his jaw dropped. And I mean, I remember preaching and looking over at this young man who I'd never seen. I was like, I can tell this kid is having a moment. And, you know, I think we hung out like 2 days later, and he just shared with me his story and how he had given up on the church and moved on. And all of a sudden, this unexpected, I've never felt more welcomed, I've never felt more accepted. And he's like, I can still to this day vividly remember the presence of God with me so heavily in that moment. I'm gonna try to pull up a text he just sent me. I texted him yesterday as I was walking through. I was like, I might share a story about you. And he just wrote to me yesterday. He said, I hold that day as a redefining moment in my faith. It was the first time I not only felt God with me again, but also a community that accepted and loved me for my 100% authentic self. So that was the first time I felt God vividly in years, right? These are the stories of the God who delivers and saves and creates new beginnings. I remember Salt. I've walked around Salt before it was there, when it was empty, and then even when it was just scaffolding. I would walk there for hours by myself during the hardest moments of Imagine, where it looks like there's no way, we have no place to meet, there is no path before us. And I would go there saying, God, you have to make a way out of no way. You have to create this path as we walk on this path. And I saw that God of the scriptures create that path as we walked on it, deliver us and lead us to new possibilities that we could not see with our own eyes, but we kept walking towards in faith. This is the God who says you can begin again. During a time where we are preparing ourselves for a new thing and we're wondering if we can begin again, in that moment yesterday, I felt like I was walking through a museum of new beginnings. I've seen new beginnings in that warehouse. I've seen new beginnings in that bar. I've seen new beginnings in this community. I've felt and experienced and embraced new beginnings in my own life from God here. So no matter what, you can begin again. And even in the wilderness, you still have the power to tell stories to others of God's faithfulness. Because just like Moses and his father-in-law, the stories of how God has been faithful to you can become the opening to God's future for somebody else. The stories of God's faithfulness to you open up a new future for somebody else. Nobody can ever take from you the power to tell stories. And sometimes stories are the most powerful and revolutionary thing that we have. Do not downplay the power of God's stories in your life. Do not hesitate to share the stories of God's faithfulness in your life. I was walking through a museum of new beginnings. Many of you have experienced those and have your own stories, and you have the power to share those and tell those to people who are wondering around you if they can begin again. Storytelling is revolutionary. Stories are what change us and sustain us and inspire us and move us and transform us. You can tell stories about God's faithfulness. You can tell stories about God's presence. You can tell stories about God's people. And you should. Right now, where everybody is, we need to tell these kinds of stories, especially right now. So with your friends, your family, the people in your life, you don't have to know the Bible as a whole in order to tell stories of God's deliverance in your life. You don't have to have all the answers to bear witness to how you have seen God work in your life. Because here's the thing. People might be tired of religion, but no one gets tired of hearing good stories. Right? You don't argue with stories. You don't fight stories. You can be a witness to tell the stories of God's faithfulness, and it creates a space for other people to respond. That's the power of being a witness. Nobody can take away your power to tell stories. Even in the wilderness, you have the power to tell stories of God's faithfulness. And you may not realize it, but there are other people who have a future with God that will be opened up through the stories that you tell of God's faithfulness and deliverance. So let's remember those things. One, as we approach it, this new thing, whatever it is, no matter how overwhelmed things have been, you can begin again. Do I have what it takes? You can be. This is the God of new beginnings who constantly creates new things. So if you're overwhelmed, would you trust and would you lean into you can begin again? And also, would you remember in the wilderness you can still tell stories of God's faithfulness, and would you know and recognize how powerful those stories of God's faithfulness are, because they're the stories you know and you are a witness to.
During this time of quarantine, when it feels like the wilderness, I pray that you continue to watch over the essential workers as they're constantly putting their health and well-being on the line to serve others. I also pray that you watch over their family members and loved ones and their well-being. And I also pray that you give clarity to those who are mentally, physically, or emotionally in distress with everything that's going on. And I pray that you help them see that there's a bigger picture to all of this, and that, you know, in the end, that it will work out and that things will eventually be okay.
During this time of quarantine, when it can feel like the wilderness, I pray that you would hold close to God and know that He has your back. One of my favorite passages of the entire Bible is Romans 8. And starting in Romans 8, verse 31, it says, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" And I also like to throw in, what can be against us? And if you keep scrolling down a little further, in verse 38, it says, "For I am convinced that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus." And when tragedies like coronavirus happen, I like to throw in that particular tragedy into that list, because even something as deadly as the coronavirus ultimately can't separate us from the hope that we have and the love that we have in Christ.
During this time in quarantine, where it can feel like the wilderness, I pray that you would feel more connected and less alone, knowing that we are all alone together. I pray that you would know that God loves you and feel how much He loves you, especially during this time. I pray that you would know how proud God is of you for taking care of the ones around you and for taking the time to take care of yourself. I pray that even through all the ups and downs of your emotions, that you would know that God still has His favor on you and that He chooses you every day.
I will sing of your goodness, I will sing of your love. Though the seasons come quickly, you have always been enough. Though the night may get darker, though the waiting seems long, you have always been faithful to remind me of your love. And you are good. In the morning I'll sing, you are good. In the evening I'll sing, you are good. You are good to me. You have always been patient. You have always been kind. You're persistent through the ages. So you are a friend of mine. So I remind my soul to bless you, standing firm upon the truth, knowing you cannot be shaken. 'Cause I've seen what you can do. You are good. In the morning I'll see you are good. In the evening I'll see you are good. You are good to me. Keep on getting better. 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 You are good. In the morning I'll sing, you are good. In the evening I'll sing, you are good. You are good to me. Every day gets sweeter. Every day gets better. 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 And you are good. In the morning I'll sing, you are good. In the evening I'll sing, you are good. You are good to me.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord makes his face shine on you and be gracious to you.
The Lord turns his face toward you and give you peace. And the community of Imagine says, Amen.